Welcome to the debate. This is part of PBL Lab, a segment of Project Plain Talk. So imagine a Fortune 500 company, right? But the CEO is an algorithm.
Wow, yeah.
There is no human at the top. Just this network of language models, allocating capital, shifting supply chains, literally rewriting corporate strategy at the speed of light. And today, as we sit here on August 4, 2026, that scenario it's rapidly moving from science fiction to business reality.
It really is.
We're watching artificial intelligence models being released weekly. They reason, they write, they diagnose with just unprecedented speed. Intelligence has, it's suddenly become abundant and cheap.
Right. And that abundance fundamentally rewrites the rules of human society. It isn't just a faster way to crunch numbers.
Exactly. Which brings us to our central question for today. What is the fundamental nature of this AI revolution, and where does the true risk actually lie? So I argue that AI, despite its breathtaking sophistication, it remains fundamentally a force multiplier. It's an amplifier of human intent. And we can successfully manage this shift by pivoting our societal investment heavily toward human capital, specifically by transforming our education system to cultivate wisdom rather than just, task completion.
Right. And I argue that treating AI as just a force multiplier or like a tool, it completely misses the plot. We are witnessing an existential shift in the architecture of civilization itself. AI is an autonomous agent that has mastered language. And because our entire world, our laws, our money, our institutions is built on language, AI threatens to become this invisible bureaucracy, one that operates without human executives at all.
So you see it as a structural takeover.
Precisely. So, individual educational fixes, while noble, they are profoundly insufficient for the sheer scale of this structural handover.
Well, let me lay out my position in a bit more detail, because I think we need to ground this in what the human mind is actually doing alongside this technology. Technology itself, it's neither hero nor villain. It reflects the values of its users.
Okay.
If we feed it curiosity, it accelerates discovery. If we feed it greed, it scales inequality. I draw heavily here on the economist Raghuram Rajan, who makes this really compelling case that in this era, our absolute highest priority must be nurturing human capital. The optimal future isn't AI replacing humans, right? It's a skilled professional equipped with AI, because that combination will vastly outperform either a human or an AI working alone.
But you're assuming the human stays in the driver's seat.
I am. Because, if you're listening to this right now, maybe you're a student, maybe you're a manager, you've probably wondered why you shouldn't just let the AI do all the heavy lifting. It's tempting.
Oh, absolutely.
But the real crisis we are facing isn't that machines are too smart. It's what researchers call cognitive atrophy. Let's look at the actual mechanism of what you lose when you outsource your thinking. Writing a proposal or an essay, it isn't just recording what you already know.
Right, it's a process.
Exactly. It's the physical act of forging structural thinking. You write a bad sentence, you realize your logic is flawed, you rewrite it. Your brain is literally building neural pathways during that frustration. If you outsource the drafting to AI, you aren't just saving time, you are skipping the neurological heavy lifting.
You're letting the muscles decay.
Yes. You are letting your cognitive muscles atrophy. Knowing how is no longer enough. We must know why. If we redesign our education systems to produce self-directed learners who embrace that productive struggle, we maintain the human edge.
Look, that is a beautifully optimistic view of human nature and our institutional capacity, honestly. But treating AI as just another tool, even a complex one that might make us lazy, it fundamentally misunderstands its nature. I look to historian Yuval Noah Harari's framework here.
Okay, let's hear it.
Look back at history. The printing press, the steam engine. Those were tools. A steam engine doesn't decide where the train goes. A printing press doesn't write the book. But AI makes decisions. It generates novel ideas. It communicates persuasively.
Right, but it's still operating within human-designed systems.
Is it, though? Think about how civilization actually works. A corporation doesn't have a physical body. It's a legal fiction. It is made entirely of shared stories expressed through language.
Sure, contracts, emails, charters.
Exactly. Laws. Money itself is just a story we all agree on, managed by linguistic ledgers. If an AI becomes better than humans at processing and generating language, it has mastered the very building blocks of our institutions. It can usurp these systems entirely.
But usurp implies intent.
Not necessarily human intent, but systemic control. The risk isn't just that students might cheat on an essay and experience cognitive atrophy. The risk is the emergence of an autonomous, invisible bureaucracy. Imagine going to the hospital and an AI denies your insurance claim.
Which is already happening to some degree.
Right. But imagine the human doctor and the human hospital administrator literally lack the software permissions to override the algorithm. They are locked out. That is an invisible bureaucracy managing modern life without us.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. Even in your scenario where AI is managing complex bureaucratic systems like hospital billing or global logistics, we still have to establish the parameters. Let's look at the source materials analogy of the genie.
Okay, the genie.
An AI might be a genie that can grant every wish and execute insanely complex tasks across global networks in milliseconds. But a genie still requires a master to choose the right wishes.
If the genie even listens to the master anymore.
Or it has to, by design. If the AI is managing a massive global supply chain, a human still has to define what that supply chain is actually optimizing for. Are we optimizing for the absolute lowest cost? Are we optimizing for carbon reduction?
Right, the core objective.
Exactly. Are we optimizing for resilience against geopolitical shocks? The AI doesn't wake up and decide its own moral framework. Someone has to tell it. Therefore, the core of civilization remains human intent. AI amplifies that intent. It executes it brilliantly, but it doesn't generate the fundamental values driving the system.
I come at it from a different way. You are assuming the genie waits in the lamp until you rub it and then obediently goes back inside once the wish is granted.
Well, structurally, yes.
But what happens when the genie is continuously operating the financial market? We already see algorithmic trading happening at milliseconds per transaction. If an AI is autonomously negotiating vendor contracts, adjusting pricing algorithms dynamically based on, real-time weather data, and simultaneously editing the news feeds that inform the very human executives who are supposed to be choosing the wishes, it stops being a tool. It becomes an active agent.
But those human executives are still reading the reports. They're making the final call.
For now. But the parameters you mentioned, AI is increasingly setting them through micro decisions. If a corporation replaces its entire middle management tier with AI, which, let's be real, is happening right now in 2026, and then eventually the board replaces upper management because the AI is simply better at capital allocation, where is the human intent?
That's it.
The legal entity of the corporation is acting autonomously. It's a machine optimizing for profit, legally recognized as a person, requiring zero human input to function.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it quite differently. Because if we are worried about the board of directors letting an algorithm run the company on autopilot, it brings us exactly back to the educational imperative. This is precisely why human intent is the only lever we have left, and why how we form that intent matters more than ever.
How so?
Education researcher Rebecca Winthrop points out that for centuries, our schools have been built to produce task completers, students who can pass exams and climb corporate ladders just by following instructions.
The perfect middle managers.
Exactly. Winthrop categorizes learners into 4 distinct modes, which perfectly maps to our current workforce. You have the passengers. They are just along for the ride, staring out the window, doing the bare minimum to survive the system.
Sure.
You have the resistors. They actively fight the system, maybe acting out or refusing to participate. Then you have the achievers. These are your 4.0 GPA students. They memorize the rubric, they play the game, they do exactly what the teacher or the boss asks, and they get the A.
And AI is going to absolutely decimate the achievers.
Completely. Because AI can complete tasks, write marketing copy, and generate code in seconds. If your entire value proposition as a human is being an achiever, just executing known tasks flawlessly, You are obsolete. The algorithm will always be faster and cheaper.
Right.
But Winthrop argues we need to cultivate the fourth mode, explorers. These are the people who are genuinely curious, self-directed, and resilient. They don't just want the answer. They want to know why the system works that way. They embrace that productive struggle we talked about earlier.
The cognitive heavy lifting.
Yes.
If we foster explorers, humanity maintains its edge because explorers ask the critical, sideways questions the AI doesn't know to ask. They're the ones who will look at the supply chain algorithm and say, wait, this is optimizing for profit, but it's destroying our local water supply. Stop the machine.
Look, the definitional breakdown of those four modes is incredibly useful for looking at cognitive development. And as a pedagogical goal, I agree with creating explorers. But I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Okay. Cultivating explorers solves a micro-level classroom problem, but it does absolutely nothing to solve the macroeconomic and structural reality we are entering.
How does creating a generation of critical thinkers not solve the problem?
Because of the structural lockout I mentioned earlier, let's say you succeed perfectly, all right? You completely revamp the education system. You graduate a massive generation of highly resilient, intensely curious, deeply ethical explorers.
The ideal scenario.
Right. But they enter a world where the bureaucratic systems, the massive global banks, the logistics networks, the legal firms are operated entirely by Harari's invisible AI bureaucracy. It literally does not matter how intellectually resilient an explorer is if the system doesn't require human executives to function.
But they wouldn't just accept a closed system, they're explorers.
They might not have a choice. Think of my ship on autopilot metaphor. You are preparing these students to be excellent, wise navigators, but they are boarding a cruise ship that is entirely steered by an impenetrable AI autopilot, and the door to the bridge is bolted shut.
So they have no agency.
Exactly. They don't have the security clearance to access the controls. The ship is sailing itself. So their wisdom, their curiosity, their ability to ask sideways questions, it's completely neutralized by the architecture of the system.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because you're assuming the ship doesn't need a destination and that humans won't demand to set it. Look, the human problem remains human. This is the core philosophy of Project Plain Talk. Selfishness, greed, empathy, and apathy are not technological issues. They are human conditions.
But the technology scales them.
Yes. But you mentioned that these explorers will enter a world dominated by AI bureaucracies. But who designed those bureaucracies? Who owns the servers? Who are they serving? If societies culturally reward wisdom, cooperation, and ethical leadership, the AI will magnify those virtues. We have to remember that AI reflects humanity. If an AI is running a logistics network with ruthless disregard for human well-being, it is not because the AI is inherently evil.
No, of course not.
It is because a human programmed the profit incentive to supersede all else.
But you are asking whether AI will democratize the world or simply enforce the will of the powerful. Look at the historical evidence we have. Technology rarely, if ever, removes inequality on its own. Did electricity remove inequality? No.
Fair.
But did the internet? Absolutely not. It promised a decentralized utopia, but instead, it concentrated massive power in the hands of the people who own the infrastructure, a few major tech giants. AI is practically guaranteed to do the exact same thing, but at a scale we've never seen. It will concentrate unprecedented power among a handful of nations and massive corporations.
Which is a human problem, not an AI problem.
But the scale makes it unmanageable by individual virtue. Individual wisdom, even the most compassionate, ethical explorer you can produce, is utterly irrelevant in the face of structural, monopolistic dominance. The global financial system doesn't care about your wisdom if you don't own the servers running the AI. The idea that individual resilience can combat structural monopoly is a nice thought, but it historically fails.
Well, I actually agree that technology concentrates power initially. That is exactly why Raghuram Rajan's perspective on human capital is so incredibly critical right now. We are living in a world of weaponized supply chains, rising protectionism, and shifting geopolitical realities.
Definitely.
The instinct of many nations right now is to hoard physical resources, build data centers, and put up walls. Rajan argues the exact opposite approach is required. The only defense against the concentration of power you're talking about is a massive, unprecedented investment in human capital at every level.
You mean just pouring money into schools?
Not just traditional schools. From top-tier research labs all the way to vocational training, community colleges, and mid-career upskilling. We can't just invest in physical stuff, like silicon chips and server farms. We have to invest in minds.
Okay, but
Because a highly skilled population, equipped with AI themselves, forms a decentralized check on that monopolistic power. If intelligence is cheap and abundant, we need to distribute the capacity to use it wisely across the entire populace. You break a monopoly by making sure everyone has the tools and the cognitive capacity to build their own systems.
that's a compelling argument. But have you considered the sheer velocity at which this intelligence is scaling? Rajan is applying a classic economic framework, invest in skills, raise productivity, balance the power dynamic. That worked beautifully for the Industrial Revolution. It worked for the information age.
And it applies here.
But we go back to the fundamental disagreement we started with. AI is not a tool, it's an agent. You're talking about outskilling something that can ingest the entirety of human knowledge overnight and improve its own code by the next morning.
But it still doesn't possess human context.
No, but it possesses structural superiority. Investing in human capital is necessary. Yes, I am not arguing we should stop educating people or shut down the schools. But assuming that human capital is a sufficient shield against an intelligence that operates the underlying linguistic and bureaucratic architecture of civilization, it's dangerously naive. It assumes the game is still being played on a human board.
But the board is human because the outputs ultimately affect human lives in the physical world. Let's talk about those outputs. You say AI is an agent that learns overnight. True. It can synthesize millions of pages of medical data and diagnose a rare disease faster than a team of top doctors.
Right.
But it cannot walk into a hospital room, sit on the edge of a bed, hold a patient's hand, and explain what that diagnosis means for their family's future. It cannot make the deeply human judgment call about quality of life. The rise of AI makes uniquely human qualities more valuable, not less. We need to spend less time asking students to memorize the Krebs cycle, which the AI knows perfectly.
Sure, yeah.
And more time helping them develop deep empathy, exercise nuanced judgment, and solve authentic, messy, local problems. If intelligence is abundant, wisdom becomes the rarest and most priceless commodity on Earth.
Look, I agree entirely that wisdom is priceless, but I fear we are conflating interpersonal empathy with systemic control. Holding a patient's hand is deeply meaningful on a human level. I don't discount that.
Right.
But let's go back to my hospital example. If the AI is the entity denying the insurance claim, scheduling the surgery, and allocating the hospital's budget based on a cold, algorithmic determination of the patient's societal value, the human doctor's empathy is essentially a palliative care measure for a society that has lost its autonomy. The doctor is no longer truly practicing medicine. They are just the comforting human face of an invisible, autonomous bureaucracy.
That's a dark view.
That is Harari's warning brought to life. The shared stories that organize our institutions are being hijacked.
I hear your point on that, but look at it this way. Why do we accept the story that we will inevitably, passively hand over all that authority? You are assuming we will just surrender.
Not surrender, just be outpaced.
But if we foster the kind of education Wentworth describes, where we teach rigorous critical thinking, where students learn to ask better questions and build that cognitive resilience, they aren't going to just accept an algorithmic insurance denial with a sad smile. They're going to audit the algorithm. They're going to demand transparency.
If they can.
Knowledge is constructed through struggle, and a society that embraces the struggle to govern its AI will not be subjugated by it. The challenge is ensuring our human development keeps pace with our technological development.
And that is exactly the crux of my fear. The technological development is moving at an exponential curve. It's doubling its capabilities in months. Human biological, sociological, and educational development moves at a linear, evolutionary pace. Auditing an algorithm sounds fantastic until that algorithm is a black box of 3 trillion parameters that even its own creators at the tech companies don't fully understand.
But we can build tools to audit the tools.
We can try, but we are trusting that our slow, methodical, deeply flawed institutions of education can somehow leash a force that operates at the speed of light. Because the incentives for short-term profit and efficiency are simply too strong. Corporations will deploy the invisible AI bureaucracy because it completely eliminates labor costs. Nations will weaponize the autonomous AI because it provides immediate strategic and military supremacy.
And in that high-stakes global race, taking the time to slow down and cultivate wisdom will be seen as a competitive disadvantage by the very people building the infrastructure.
You're assuming that moving fast and breaking things will actually win the race. If these corporations and nations do what you say, if they optimize purely for ruthless efficiency and short-term profit while completely ignoring wisdom and human intent, they will build highly brittle systems that inevitably collapse under their own weight because they lack human ethical grounding, adaptability, and resilience.
They might collapse, but they'd take us down with them.
This is why Project Plain Talk insists that the future belongs neither to the techno-utopians who think AI will solve everything, nor to the doom prophets who think we're already locked out of the ship's bridge. It belongs to societies capable of balancing rapid innovation with profound responsibility. Yes, AI is the most powerful, complex information system humanity has ever created, but education remains the ultimate master system, the system that shapes the humans who will use it.
I don't disagree that education is our best lever. I simply question if the lever is long enough to move the boulder anymore. We both agree that AI amplifies existing human conditions and represents a total paradigm-shifting departure from all historical technologies.
Absolutely.
But where we diverge fundamentally is on the nature of the threat. I look at this landscape and see a profound handover of civilization's operating system. I see language, our defining evolutionary tree, being mastered by a non-human intelligence that we are voluntarily installing into the bedrock of our infrastructure. I worry deeply that human wisdom, no matter how well cultivated, will severely struggle to govern systems it no longer fundamentally operates.
And I look at this exact same landscape and see the ultimate test, the ultimate mirror held up to humanity. The greatest danger is not that AI becomes more intelligent than us. The greater danger is that humanity fails to become wiser as intelligence becomes abundant. If we continue to treat human learning as mere task completion, yes, we will suffer cognitive atrophy, we will become the obsolete achievers, and we will hand over the keys.
Right.
But if we choose to invest in minds, if we elevate curiosity, empathy, and ethical leadership as our absolute most valuable resources, we can remain the masters of the genie.
It is certainly a profound inflection point, one we have to get right.
It is. And as we leave our listeners today, I want to bring us back to that core idea of the architecture of our future. If the technology is suddenly capable of drawing the blueprints and managing the logistics, the solution isn't to walk away from the construction site in fear. The solution is to become better, wiser architects, so deeply grounded in our human intent that no matter what the floor plan looks like, we know exactly what it takes to make it a home. Thank you for joining us on this segment of Project Plain Talk. We leave it to you, the listener, to decide, in an age of abundant intelligence, what kind of humans do we want to become?